The will reading is Friday. Don't come. You're not on the list. My sister texted. I hadn't spoken to my father since the funeral. I stared at the screen long enough for it to go dim. Outside my condo, the city of Boston moved on. Indifferent. Cars zipped past on Commonwealth Avenue, and somewhere below, a group of college students was laughing too loudly for a Tuesday night. But I sat frozen, thumb hovering over a reply I'd never send. The last time I saw Chloe, she'd been wearing mom's pearls, the ones Margaret said she'd save for me. But there they were, resting on Chloe's collarbone at the graveside service, as if she knew no one would question her. And no one did. Least of all Dad, who only gave me a stiff nod before placing his hand on Chloe's back like she'd been the widow, not the daughter. I got through that day by staying silent, by letting the ache in my chest dull into something manageable. Now, a week later, the ache sharpened. I stood up and crossed to the built-in filing cabinet tucked behind my office desk. It had been years since I opened the bottom drawer, the one labeled Personal Legacy. Dust had settled along the metal rail. Inside, amid utility bills and a faded birthday card from Mom, was a heavy ivory envelope. My name written in her cursive. No return address. Postmarked September 3rd, 2023. I remembered the day it arrived. I'd assumed it was a sentimental note, maybe something for safekeeping. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't had the heart. Now, I slid it open with a gold letter opener, and my hands trembled the moment the will slid out. Official, notarized, Margaret Elaine Bennett, sound of mind and body. Dated, witnessed. My name was there. Not just mentioned, centered. The lakehouse on Cider Shore Drive is to pass to my daughter, Lauren Elaine Bennett. This transfer is to be immediate and irrevocable upon my death. Chloe's name appeared below. Secondary trustee, only to manage the estate if I declined. And then, tucked behind the will, a handwritten note. Her handwriting had weakened, but the loops were still there, still hers. Just in case they forget who you are. Love you always, Mom. I sank onto the edge of the bed, note trembling in my fingers. I hadn't cried since the funeral. Not even when Dad called me remote in front of Aunt Gina. Not even when Chloe announced at the wake that she'd be handling everything now. But now, alone in my condo lit by too cold LED, I let tears slip free. Not from grief, from the sheer audacity of being erased. I pulled out my phone again, scrolled through old messages with Daniel Pierce, the senior analyst from our private wealth division. He'd always been discreet, pragmatic, the kind of person you trusted with asset transfers and contingency planning. I started typing. Flight booked. Need you in Syracuse by Friday morning. Bring your file. I hit send and sat in the silence that followed. The condo felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the truth settling in. They had tried to pretend I didn't exist. And they were about to find out that I did. Lauren books a flight. She emails Daniel. I need you in Syracuse by Friday morning. Bring your file. I don't need them to welcome me back. I just need them to hear the truth. The light filtering into my office at Greenmere Tech was a pale winter gray, like the air hadn't decided whether to snow or rain. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the Charles River ripple in the distance, arms crossed, fingers clutched around a folded piece of silk. Margaret's scarf, ivory with embroidered wildflowers, the one she used to wear when we walked Beacon Hill together, back when she still made time for weekends in Boston. It still carried a trace of her scent, lavender and ink, and something older, like cedar trunks and August air. I'd found it in a sealed envelope next to the notarized will. She must have packed it herself, months before. The note had simply said, "For the day you need to remember I saw you." Now I did. Not just remember. Believe it. And I wasn't going to walk into that room in Syracuse hoping to be seen. I would arrive with proof. Daniel arrived at my office exactly at 10 o'clock, as promised. He wore the kind of coat that said competence, not flash. His briefcase clicked open with practiced calm, and he placed 3 folders on the table between us like we were preparing for litigation. We have everything, he said. Original scans, notarized deeds, date-stamped emails. Even the verification letter from Margaret's attorney confirming authenticity last fall. I nodded once. Anything Chloe could try to use against us? He hesitated, then pulled out a printed email, sliding it across the glass tabletop. It was dated January 7th, 2024, sent from Chloe's personal account to Daniel's team inbox. Hi, Daniel. I'm helping manage Mom's affairs now and wanted to streamline some of the property designations. Is it possible to consolidate anything Lauren's name is on to a joint holding under my father's name for tax purposes? I stared at the line that said, without bothering Lauren with extra signatures. My teeth clenched. She didn't know you were my portfolio head, did she? Nope, Daniel said flatly. She thinks I'm just back office support. I folded the email. Keep this. If she tries to say I wasn't involved or that Mom was confused, this ends it. Daniel reached for another folder. I also compiled the timestamped deed transfers. Margaret signed over the lakehouse in 2019, notarized at Albany County. You'll want this page in your front packet. I took it, eyes scanning the clean signatures. I remember when she visited that year. I murmured. She came to the Greenmere office for the first and only time. Said it felt like stepping into a world I'd carved out of stone. She whispered, "You built this." Daniel didn't say anything, and I didn't need him to. I flipped through the packet one last time. Will, trust, deed, notarized letters, proof of communication. It was all here. Not vengeance. Just the truth. I booked the hotel across from the law office. I said, downtown Syracuse, Friday morning, 8:30 sharp. Don't use my name on any records. Understood. I reached for the scarf and carefully folded it into a small zippered pouch. My mother wouldn't be in that room, but her words would. Daniel paused at the doorway before leaving. Are you nervous? I shook my head. Not really. Let them think I won't show. I want Chloe to feel safe when she steps into that room. He raised a brow. Then, as he turned to leave, his lips curled in a half smile. Then we're going in as professionals, not family. Chloe's voice trembled when she saw me. Wait, why is my boss here? The room didn't fall silent so much as it paused, like breath held before a verdict. Every head turned toward the door as I stepped inside, scarf tucked into my coat pocket, Daniel at my right shoulder. The gleaming wood-paneled conference room at Watson and Frank smelled faintly of fresh coffee and old tension. Watson, the attorney, blinked up from his folder, then stood. Ms. Bennett, he said neutrally. I wasn't expecting. My attendance was confirmed through the estate documents, I said, setting my leather folder on the table before him, along with my right to review and participate as a named beneficiary. Edward's face soured before he spoke. You weren't invited. Legal participation doesn't require an invitation, Dad. My voice was even, measured. But I appreciate the clarity. Chloe rose halfway from her chair, eyes darting between me and Daniel like a trap had just sprung. You have no right to be here. This is for family. I kept my gaze on her. He's not here as family. Daniel stepped forward, opening his folder with clinical precision. I'm Daniel Pierce, financial counsel representing Lauren Bennett. I've also worked with the estate since 2022 on Mrs. Margaret Bennett's trust restructuring. Chloe's lips parted. Her eyes widened as realization sank in. You work under her? Daniel nodded. I report to Lauren at Greenmere Tech. I was unaware when Chloe first contacted me privately in January that she did not disclose this family connection. I've since recused myself from any internal conflicts. Watson looked from Daniel to the documents in front of him. Then he nodded slowly, adjusting his reading glasses. The packet matches what we have on file, including deed verification, notarized amendments, and trustee designations. Chloe's composure cracked. You manipulated Mom, she spat, pushing up from the table. She was vulnerable, and you waited until— No, I said, calm but firm. You just assumed she didn't make her own decisions. You thought because I didn't argue, I didn't matter. That was your mistake. I felt no heat in my voice. No triumph, only stillness. This wasn't revenge. This was gravity. Quiet, unstoppable. Edward looked stunned, as if processing the shift of power from Chloe's smokescreens to cold, irreversible facts. You blindsided us. You kept me out, I replied. I simply walked through the door you locked behind me. Watson cleared his throat. There's something else. He reached into the file box beside him and pulled out a sealed envelope, cream paper smoothed flat, my full name handwritten in curling blue ink. There's a sealed letter addressed to Lauren, from your mother, dated 3 weeks before her passing. The house was signed over 5 years ago, witnessed and notarized. And you, Chloe, were the witness. I slid the certified deed across the polished conference table. The embossed notary seal gleamed faintly under the harsh overhead lights. For a moment, no one moved. Chloe's face drained of color. Her eyes snapped to the document, scanning it like it might shift under pressure. That's not— she stammered. I didn't know what that was. You signed as witness, I said, voice level. You stood in the room when Mom transferred ownership of the lakehouse to me. September 12th, 2019, Albany County. I was in Boston. You were there. Watson leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. The signature is valid, notarized. 2 witnesses, one being Ms. Chloe Bennett, the other a retired court clerk who also signed her affidavit that day. Edward shot upright. That can't be right. Margaret, she never told me. She didn't tell a lot of people, I replied, because she knew some would try to undo what she wanted. Chloe laughed, brittle and sharp. You think she just gave it to you? That house was our childhood. She wouldn't— Daniel's voice was quiet but clear as he opened his folder again. On January 7th, 2024, Chloe emailed our department at Greenmere requesting to streamline the estate holdings. Specifically, she asked how to consolidate property where Lauren's name appeared, and whether it could be moved under Edward Bennett's name without further paperwork. He placed the printed email on the table. Watson took it, read silently, then looked up with the first flicker of disapproval on his face. Chloe's voice cracked. I was just trying to keep things simple. Mom was already fading by then, and Lauren didn't even return calls. Actually, I interrupted, I spoke to Mom every week. She visited Boston in late 2019. I took her to my office, showed her what I'd built. She said it felt like walking into something she never thought possible for a daughter who was never anyone's favorite. I didn't say it to wound. I said it because it was true. Watson tapped the deed. This transfer predates Margaret's decline. Her medical records show no cognitive impairment until at least 2022. Legally, she was entirely competent in 2019. Edward leaned back in his chair like someone had knocked the wind out of him. She was confused, he said, but it came out hollow. She wasn't in her right mind. She wouldn't have done this to us. Watson didn't even blink. There's a video recording. Dated, time-stamped, and legally sound. Recorded during the deed transfer, at her request. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Chloe's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Edward stared at Watson like he'd spoken in a different language. Watson reached into a drawer, pulled out a small black USB drive, and placed it gently on the table. Would the family like to hear what Margaret said about this decision? In her own words? If you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and someone's trying to erase Lauren again. The room had gone dark, save for the soft glow from the mounted screen at the end of the table. Margaret's face filled the frame, her eyes clear, voice steady. She wore her favorite navy sweater, the one with the little pearl buttons down the sleeves, and the light behind her suggested late afternoon sun. I recognized the room, the sitting area in her study where she used to write letters on thick linen stationery. No one breathed. First, she said, smiling faintly. Don't let them interrupt this. It took me 3 tries to record because the dog barked. The mail came early and, well, life never stops. But I needed to say this while I still could. Chloe stiffened across the table. Daniel didn't blink. Edward sat with his hands folded tightly, staring at the screen like he might fall through it. I want to talk about the lakehouse, Margaret continued, and about my daughters. Her voice didn't waver. Lauren didn't ask for it. She never asked for anything. She built her life away from here, brick by brick, without ever once demanding a share. That's why I gave her what I had. The house was always meant to be hers. A sound caught in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Margaret's gaze, even through the lens, was sharp. Chloe means well, but Chloe needs control. She always has. That's not a flaw, just a fact. And sometimes when people need control, they rewrite the past to make it make sense. But the truth doesn't need rewriting. Chloe's fists curled at her sides. I've spoken with Attorney Watson. I filed the necessary paperwork. If Chloe tells you I wasn't lucid, remind her she was the witness. She signed. She knew she chose to forget. A murmur broke out among the relatives sitting along the wall. Someone gasped. Watson cleared his throat quietly, but no one turned their eyes away. Margaret leaned slightly forward in the frame. Lauren, if you're watching this, stay steady. You don't have to fight to be seen anymore. Let the truth speak. It's enough. The screen went black. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything no one could now deny. Chloe stood abruptly, chair screeching back. She didn't mean that. She was confused. Someone got in her head. She was clearer than any of us, I said, rising slowly. She recorded that 2 weeks before she passed. Chloe's voice trembled. This isn't over. No, I said. It's finally over. She stormed from the room, heels clicking hard against the floor. Edward didn't move to follow. He sat slumped, his face in his hands. Watson gave the room a moment, then turned to me with quiet precision. There's one last envelope. Margaret left it sealed, for you alone. I didn't win anything. I just reclaimed what was mine. Mist curled along the lake like breath not yet exhaled. The morning air stung faintly with spring's first bite, damp with thawing pine and wet earth. I stepped out of the car and onto the gravel drive I hadn't walked in 12 years. The lakehouse stood in its quiet symmetry ahead. Cream siding, moss-darkened shingles, the bay window still framed with the shutters Dad painted when I was 8. In my coat pocket, Margaret's scarf remained tucked safely inside its pouch. The faint lavender scent lingered, like memory preserved in fabric. I hadn't dared to unfold it. Not yet. Daniel carried the files, copies of the new deed, the charter for the Margaret Bennett Foundation Fund, and the agenda for its first board meeting. All of it would stay here. This house, once a battleground, would become a place for something else. Inside, nothing had changed. The same grandfather clock ticked near the fireplace. The same ceramic mallard sat on the bookshelf by the den. I walked the halls like a visitor in my own past, brushing fingertips against door frames, letting the silence settle around me. At the kitchen table, I broke the seal on the envelope Watson had handed me. Margaret's handwriting flowed across the page, looser than usual, but steady. Lauren, this house is yours. But more than that, I want you to create something lasting with it. Make it yours in the truest way. Let it become what you were never allowed to have. A place that's fully yours. Heal here. I love you always. I folded the letter back into its envelope with a care I couldn't explain. Then I laid it on the table, next to the foundation documents Daniel began to organize. The light through the window danced across the surface of the polished wood. Footsteps outside. Daniel's gaze flicked to the window. He's here. I nodded. Edward stood on the porch, holding his hat in both hands like a man unsure what to do with them. His face looked older than last week. Or maybe just more honest. I opened the door but didn't speak. He cleared his throat. I didn't know how much I'd believed Chloe until it all fell apart. I waited. She was always louder, more certain. He met my eyes unsure. But you were steady. Margaret saw that. I didn't. I'm not angry anymore, I said softly. But I won't step back in. He nodded. I understand. There were no hugs, no promises, just a final look exchanged between two people who had finally stopped pretending they knew each other. He turned and walked back down the path. I didn't watch him go. Instead, I walked into the kitchen and placed the deed on top of the foundation binder. Beside it, I left a single line, handwritten in black ink. Make this house about opportunity, not inheritance. Daniel would handle the meeting. I didn't need to be there. The gravel crunched beneath our feet as we returned to the car. The engine hummed to life. We pulled back onto the winding lake road as sunlight finally broke through the thinning mist. My phone buzzed in my lap. Chloe. I didn't know she recorded a video. You win. I stared at the message. No anger rose, no satisfaction either. I pressed delete. No reply. The road out of Cider Shore curved like a question mark I no longer needed to answer. As we crossed the ridge, the lake vanished from view. A memory sealed behind early spring fog and unfinished sentences. Daniel drove in silence, hands steady on the wheel. I watched the pines blur past, one after another. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the need to brace for impact. I keep thinking about what Mom said in that video, I murmured. She knew. All of it. She did, Daniel said. And she left no room for misinterpretation. That was intentional. I nodded. She gave me more than a house. She gave me clarity. He glanced over. So what now? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my coat and pulled out the scarf. For the first time since I'd received it, I unfolded it fully and let it rest across my lap. The scent of lavender was faint, but real. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Now, I said quietly, I get to decide who I am outside of their story. Back in Boston, my condo felt smaller somehow, like the walls knew something had shifted. I unpacked slowly, deliberately. The envelope from Mom stayed on my desk for days. Sometimes I just looked at it. Sometimes I read the letter again. Each time, a new sentence felt heavier than before. I didn't call Edward. I didn't block Chloe. I didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't punishment. It was space. Clean, unpolluted space. And I wasn't going to fill it just to feel full. What I did do, though, was sign the final paperwork for the foundation's launch. Daniel emailed me minutes later. Board approved. First grant application opens next quarter. Working title, the Cider Shore Opportunity Fund. I replied with just 2 words. Perfect name. 3 days later, I sat in the back corner of a lecture hall at MIT, where a group of young women pitched social equity startups to a skeptical panel of investors. I wasn't on the panel. I wasn't a speaker. I was just there to watch. And maybe to see what legacy could look like when it didn't come from bloodlines and last names. A girl named Sanaa talked about building modular solar kits for low-income neighborhoods in upstate New York. Her voice shook once, then steadied. I saw a piece of myself in her. Early 20s, hungry to build something, apologizing for taking up space. After the event, I waited until the crowd thinned before slipping her a card. No company logo. Just my name, email, and 1 line in my handwriting. If no one's giving you permission, give it to yourself. She stared at the card like it was a passport. That night, I opened a new journal. First page, first line. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you unlock in someone else. 2 weeks passed before another text arrived from Chloe. They're saying the foundation is going public. You're really doing this? I stared at the screen. No anger. No victory. I typed, then deleted. Tried again. Then wrote only, yes, for Mom. I never hit send. Instead, I walked down to the Charles, sat on a bench by the esplanade, and watched rowers slice through the water like they had somewhere to be. I didn't envy them. For once, I wasn't racing toward anything. I had arrived. Lauren didn't return to claim victory. She returned to reclaim truth. The silence that once defined her absence became the foundation of a new legacy, one that spoke louder than Chloe's lies ever could. Because justice doesn't always wear a robe or bang a gavel. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a sealed envelope, in a mother's voice, in the unwavering choice to not disappear. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, truth may arrive late, but once heard, it resonates forever. Perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. If this story moved you, hit like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more. Comment 1 if you've ever felt erased and found your way back.